The reason why we're in John chapter 4 now is we are continuing in this idea, this series of the good news is who we are. We've been looking at the fact that what God does to our lives is make us a witness and a testimony to Him. It's not something we do so much as who we are and who God makes us. And what I wanted to do today is to look at how Jesus evangelizes. And I realized this could be very intimidating because you think, oh great, I'm supposed to be like Jesus. That is not going to happen. And yet, what Jesus is doing, we can do because it's who He is and it's who He's making us to be. So, what I want to do is read in the first part of this chapter. I meant to take it in two parts. And the first part is just Jesus talking with a woman at the well of Samaria. So I'm going to read the part that we're going to take today, and we're going to continue in this next week. So, John chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee, but he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and livestock?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst, but the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You've well said, 'I have no husband.' For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." And at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the man, "Come see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" And we stop there. Now, Jesus is on his way from Jerusalem to Judea. And to do that, he goes north, and there's only two ways to go. One is you cross over the Jordan, go up, and then cross back, and you're back in Judea, or you just go straight through Samaria. For the general, ordinary Jew, this would be difficult because, as it says, Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Who the Samaritans are a mix of half Jewish, half Gentiles, who it began when the Assyrians deported the northern country of Israel and repopulated it with foreigners. And they intermarried, and they have their own take on God, which is derived from the fact that they only accept the 5 books of Moses as authoritative. And they do not accept the rest of Torah. So, for this reason, the Jews say, well, you guys don't count. And yet the Samaritans say, yes, we do count. So there is two ethnic groups there in conflict. Who is legitimate? Well, Jesus is journeying because there's a possible conflict with the Pharisees. He's not prepared for that to break out into open conflict. So he's going to leave, go back to Judea, and keep on ministering. But as we see, he's stopping for a break in Samaria. And this is the setting now for this conversation. And what I want you to notice, first of all, is that Jesus is not feeling 100% at this moment. He's not fresh. He's been on the road for about 6 hours, 40 miles. He's hungry. The disciples have gone to buy food. This is their first break. And he's thirsty. You can imagine, after a 40-mile hike, how you would feel. Would you feel in a mood to share the wonderful good news about salvation and God and everything? Most of us would say, you know what? Give me a day or two until I bounce back, and then I'll start thinking about it. But you notice, Jesus does not wait until he feels better. Just something to notice. And you know, Paul the Apostle also said he did not evangelize when he felt up to it. In Galatia, he mentions this in the letter to the Galatians, that he says, you know that it was because of a disease that I first evangelized, I first witnessed to you. So evidently he was sick, and it actually was the occasion that he told them about Jesus. He wasn't 100%. And it goes on in the Bible to show us that when he came to Thessalonica for the first time, he'd just been beaten up in Philippi. He wasn't feeling 100%. And then we read in the book of Acts, chapter 18, as he was working in Corinth, and this is after Thessalonica, Jesus appeared to him and said, don't be afraid. And the reason why Jesus shows up and says, don't be afraid, is because he was afraid. And actually, Jesus felt like that would be the thing that he needed the most. To encourage him and say, you know what? Nobody's going to hurt you in this city. I've got many people here. So don't be afraid. I'm going to be with you and protect you. And evidently what he was thinking was, this is going to be like all the other times where I show up, I preach in the synagogue, they kick me out, I go to the Gentiles, then they come and beat me up. And he's kind of thinking, I don't want to do this again. Would you? See? And so Jesus says, you know what? Don't worry about it. Nobody's going to beat you up this time. I am telling you. But this is a reality that Jesus and the apostles have to deal with, many times you're not 100%. But Jesus does it anyway. So isn't that interesting? Now, what I also notice here is that Jesus actually uses his weakness to approach this Samaritan woman. You notice? There's every cultural reason not to talk to her. She's a Samaritan. She's a woman. And at this point in society, it is beneath one's dignity to talk to a woman in public. You simply do not do that. So here's 2 strikes, 2 reasons why Jesus should not evangelize, besides the fact that he doesn't feel very good right now. Everybody with me? But Jesus uses this very weakness right now to talk to her. And he says, "May I please have a drink of water?" And it's really putting him into this position of being vulnerable. Like, would you be interested in helping me, please? Isn't that interesting? What it does is it deals with fear, basically. Some strange person comes up and talks to you. What is your reaction? Even if you don't know martial arts, inside you're assuming the position. Why? Unknown. What does this guy want? Is he selling something? Can I take him? Maybe the best defense is a good offense. Hey, don't fuss with me, pal. Right? Fear of the unknown. And there you are, just coming up, I just got the 4 spiritual laws for you. Hey, watch out. I'll take you apart. I'll break you in half. I deal with that all the time. Jesus is dealing with it. Guess how he deals with it? Weakness. Isn't that interesting? So he just says, "Man, I'm thirsty. Can I have a drink?" Now what's she going to do? Kick him? He's vulnerable. So in a way, he's non-threatening. It's a temptation on our part to think we have to be very competent and very, able. But in reality, if we do that, it's going to freak people out. And they're already freaked out to start with. So Jesus uses his weakness to be non-intimidating. Now, doesn't that make you feel good? Because I have a ton of weaknesses, and so do you. That actually makes us equipped to be non-threatening. So somebody could look and say, "Wow, you are thirsty. Stay there, pal. You need some help. I'll help you." We actually had friends of ours who are missionaries in Japan for something like 18 years. A 7-foot Swede. Seriously, he used to bang his head on those doors because different sizes. Anyway, he says, "You know what? We found out something when we showed up in Japan. And that is, our goal was to be helpless. Because when you're helpless, people forget to be afraid of you and they say, 'Oh, you poor guy, you don't know how to do anything. Somebody help him.' And that's it. You're not intimidating." Now, this is 7 foot, It's a fact of life. And you know what? She feels like she can even talk to him. Right? "Hey, you're a Jew, and you're talking to me, and I'm a woman. We both know this, right?" So she can just talk straight out to him. "What are you doing?" See? And so what he's doing here is getting her interest. Because we have another problem to deal with, is that people are just into their own thing, right? So I got to get my thing done. I am here at the well. I'm here to get water. Do I really have to talk to somebody? can't I just move on with my day and try to get something done? Here you are, trying to put the brakes on my day. So he has to kind of overcome this, I'm trying to do my own thing. And everybody is trying to do their own thing. So here we come along to lower their efficiency today. Well, he's trying to get her interested. So she says, hey, I'm a woman and I'm a Samaritan, so what are you doing talking to me? A little bit of pushback, right? A little resistance. And he says, well, if you knew who it was who asked you for a drink and the gift of God, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Totally ignores all that stuff that you could just pick a fight. And he just says, hey, you don't know who you're talking to. I can give you living water. Now, he's not implying that she's stupid. You know what I mean? Don't you know who I am? No. I don't care. Get out of my way. He's kind of playing coy. Like, you should know me. But, not in an arrogant way. It's kind of like, hey, this could be good. And I could give you living water. And that's different than the usual stuff. So this is special. This is different, right? And I won't mind giving it to you either. So he's kind of ignored all the possible difficulties and just be nice and gentle. Hey. Now, she's kind of getting that Jesus is saying he's something different because she's saying, you've got nothing to draw with. The well is deep. Who do you think you are? You're greater than Jacob. Is that it? Do you do, magic? Or what is this? I know Jacob, but I don't know you. He's famous. We all know him. I don't know anything about you. But you notice that she's talking to him. Isn't that interesting? He's got something going here. And again, what Jesus is doing is overcoming this basic apathy with people. They don't want to engage, but he's engaging her. Isn't that interesting? So, then Jesus awakens some real need. And he does so by saying something that she can agree with. A very basic fact, it's a truth. Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. And she can agree with that. Yeah, you're right there. That's why I'm here with my pot. I can agree with that. And then he gives her a little bit more to think about who he is and this gift. He says, whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. Now, I just want to focus your attention on the fact that the person who receives that living water becomes a fountain himself or herself. And see, this is what we've been looking at as far as this idea of we are the good news. It's who we are. Not only do we receive life, but we can give life. Isn't that interesting? Jesus is talking about that right here. Now she says, whatever it is, I'm in. Give me this water, then I don't have to work so hard. My life will be better. Okay, I don't know quite how this works, but fire away. She's in, right? So in one sense, her resistance has been overcome. She's interested. I don't know, do your thing, man. So then Jesus kind of says, okay, go call your husband. Isn't that interesting? Now, fair enough. Now she says, well, I don't have a husband. Now listen, that's true, but that's not everything. And what she's doing is kind of covering up and looking good. You know why? Who likes to look like they're unsuccessful or failures or needy or messed up? Nobody. And she doesn't. So she tells the truth, but she's kind of saying, well, I don't have a husband right now. So now here's this automatic sort of, I need to protect myself because I'm more messed up than I look like. And I don't want to tell anybody that. And that's reasonable. Because what do you do after you open up and just say, hi, I'm a mess? Then they say, well, I don't want anything to do with you. Get away from me. So it's a self-defense kind of mode. But think about what Jesus says here. You've had 5 husbands. And the one whom you now have is not your husband. So realize what's happening there. There's a world of hurt there. You get married the first time and you think you're full of happiness. This is it. And then the awful truth, you find out, no, this is not it. Did he divorce her or she divorce him? Well, this time it's going to work, she says, and then it doesn't work. But she knows what it's like now. Third time, what would your hope be like at this point? Would you be thinking, oh man, this is going to be great? You're thinking, boy, I hope it lasts. And what do I do if I don't? And it goes again. But 4 times and 5 times, now she's living with a guy and she didn't even try to get married because what's the use? 5 times kind of makes you an expert in going, just how long can we do this until it blows up? Her hope is running out, and she knows this is not good. An inability to keep a relationship together, and what's going to happen to her? Where is she headed with her life? What is this all about? So what she's covering up is a world of hurt, and guess what? Everybody is like this. There's something completely wrong with every single human being. That's because it's a windy day outside. That's why did you notice how it was going ooh while you're looking at the slideshow? I finally figured it out. It's because the wind is moving. I thought, is this the Ken Burns effect or what? Am I drugs? You know what I'm talking about. So pay no attention to that. People generally have huge problems in their life that they cannot deal with. If they could deal with them, she would have quit marrying people around number 4 or 5 and say, this is it, I know how to do this, but that even crashed. So what Jesus is putting his finger on is she has a real need in her life. And just realize, everybody walking around you has a real need in their lives. So, he comes and says, well, you know what? You've had 5 husbands, and the guy you're living with is not your husband. So, you spoke the truth. Now, you know, at that point, he could have really jumped on her. He could have just read her the riot act about what marriage is about and the sanctity of marriage and just made her feel crummy. And she knows it. She's busted, dead to rights. Man, she can't put put any spin on that whatsoever. She's bare naked. So what does she do? Well, she asks him a question. Now, as long as I've ever read this, I've always thought this is true to life, because when you start kind of getting close to people's needs, they start looking for cover. Any port in a storm, this rock, this post, let me get away. That's possibly what's going on here. And what she is asking is this question that cannot be solved, because it's the point of conflict between the Samaritans and the Jews. Where do you worship God? And if they only accept the first 5 books of Moses, then where they're at is near the slopes of Mount Gerizim. Now, I'm not pronouncing it right, but Moses said that when you get to the promised land, you read the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal. They face one another. So the Samaritans worshiped the Lord on Mount Gerizim, where the blessings were supposed to be pronounced. Now, in the rest of Torah, David came along much later and says, Jerusalem is the place where the name of the Lord is going to be manifest. So now here's the unsolvable conflict. Moses said Mount Gerizim, basically. And David says Jerusalem. Now, who has the more authority? Who's going to decide this question, A or B? And it's one of these things that's like debating on the internet. Have you ever seen anybody say, well, come to think of it, your point is true and I'm wrong? Hey, what a great insight you have. That is never going to happen. It descends to just what they call flame throwing one another. Well, your mother stinks, and every insult possible. Pull your head out of the toilet, man. And you just read that stuff. It's like, whoa, I can't even read that. Nobody's going to give up on the internet. And nobody's ever given up in real life. And you can throw all the rocks and bricks and everything you can, but it's an unsolvable question. So she's asking Jesus this question. I always thought it's because she's looking to cover up and get lost in a useless religious discussion so that she can sneak away. But I wonder really if that's what's going on, because you know what? She's already thinking he's the Messiah. And she does say that when Messiah comes, he will tell us all things. In other words, he is going to solve the unsolvable problems of the world. Well, here's one. How do you know God? Where do you worship him? What is square one here? And so she asks him, are you really connected to God? Can you really solve this problem? It's a challenge. So you know what? He comes back and says, neither A nor B. And that's the way God talks, everybody. You give him 2 choices, he says, actually not. Remember Joshua? He says, are you for us or for our enemies? And the angel says, no, I've come as the commander of the armies of the Lord. And this is always the way it is with God. God, is it A or B? And God says, it's not relevant. I'm God. Here's my own choice. And that's exactly what Jesus does here. He says, you know what? It's not a holy place. It's a holy heart. That is acceptable to God. You can have an unclean heart at church. That doesn't make you acceptable. Just showing up to church doesn't mean a thing. He says, God is seeking worshipers who worship him in spirit and in truth. It's a holy heart, not a holy place. And that time is now. And that's why she says, you know what? I'm kind of thinking you're the Messiah. And Jesus says, I am. And she believes him. Isn't that interesting? So, that's where we have to leave it. The disciples show up with the food, but they don't step on the moment. They don't say, well, what are you looking for, lady? Or, why are you talking to her? They know enough to keep their mouth shut. He's doing something. I don't know what he's doing. Don't say anything. They're going to wait this out till they get some kind of clarity, but don't mess with it. So she just leaves her water pot and runs off to the city. We'll see that in part 2, what that means. And we'll find out what Jesus even says to his own disciples. Very interesting. Read up on it. But think about this for today. That is, you think, well, I have to be like Jesus. That's way intimidating, don't you think? I mean, how could he get all of that in just a couple of exchanges? And we work so hard, to talk to people. And especially about Jesus. There, I just said it there. Do you feel like that? I do. And that's why I'm reading this interestingly and saying, okay, how do we apply this? And the first thing I notice is, can we talk with other people? Yes, we can do this. Just about with anybody. And then think about this. Can we use our weaknesses? Like, can we even accentuate it so we don't freak somebody out? It's possible, if you think about it. The purpose is to not be intimidating. Can you be non-threatening? Think about it. Can you engage someone's interest? That is, Jesus said, can I please have a cup of water? It was just that simple. I just think that's so wonderful. It's not that big a deal. So, what I've noticed though, when I come to that point, I don't know how to do things. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and I thought, you know what, I would love to talk to this person, but I don't know how to do it. So, don't you wish you could be like Jesus in this respect? He always knows what to say, and he always says it in a way that is not creepy, not weird, not threatening. And I wish I could be uncreepy and unthreatening and all those things. So here's our secret weapon. Would you like to know what our secret weapon is? Is that the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 2 verse 16 says, we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ. What that means is we can ask God to fill us with his Holy Spirit and to help us. Now what I've noticed is when I've prayed for an opening, I get one. And it is so simple and so non-threatening. And I have to laugh because that's him. So I'll just say it. And I know it's going to work because it was so simple. I could have thought of that. Wait a minute. So I break in, start the ball rolling. This is fun. And then somehow or other, it's going to turn to Jesus. That's the way it works. I also need courage and confidence because I'm the most scared Boy Scout that ever lived. So I can pray for that. I go, God, give me the opening and then give me the courage to do this. I got to have it. Because I get all worried about this person has important things to do and I'm going to be messing up their life, etc., etc. So God, give me the courage I need to do this. Now, I wish I could say things like, oh yes, you have no husband now because you've been married 5 times. Wouldn't that be great if we could do stuff like that? Man, turbo witnessing. Wow, gosh, you're really from God. How do I get saved? My conversations are more like, I have to go. But I tell you what, I've started praying, God, would you give me anything I need to know about this person? And I remember talking to one guy in Costa, and I felt like the Lord was saying, ask him if he's married. Just like this. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I said, hey, are you married? And he goes, well, I was one time. I'm not married now. All of a sudden, we've got a real need here. And he's opening up and saying, I'm hurting. And we could talk about it. See? So I go, wow, that was cool. Why couldn't God help us in this way? I mean, totally, we're helpless. So, you know, one thing about our lives is Jesus has to be in every area, and especially in this area. We cannot do this without him. But what I hope to get into next week is the fun of doing this. The absolute insane fun of doing this. Are you interested in part 2? I hope you are. Because I'm going to be here all by myself if I have to. This is what Jesus is into. And if we have the mind of Christ, then we're going to be into it too. Now, I'm going to leave it there. I'm done. Can we pray? Okay. Thank you, Lord, that you're with us, that you're for us, that you're in us. Thank you that you can use us in our tiredness, our hunger, and our thirst. We don't have to be 100% and super competent and all those things, but you do want to work through us. So please do that and help us to know you and to know what you're like and to do the things that please you. Please abide in us and we in you. Make us people after your own heart. Thank you so much, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
For I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.